The movie industry has been around for a while now, so much so that sometimes it's cool to go back and look at movies that came before or movies that came out at a certain time period and be like, oh man, like it's been that long, and kind of reminisce about the old times, or movies that came out when you were born or when something special happened. You just want to go back and remember those moments. And I had this brilliant idea of going back 10 years, back to the year 2014, because yes, we are in 2024, 10 years ago was 2014, and I just wanted to go back to a point in time where a lot of incredible movies came out, and just kind of stop and think about that these movies are turning 10 years old now, which is absolutely insane. Now, before going any further, if my voice or, my way of speaking sounds a little weird, I am coming out of a bit of a congestion that I had for the past couple of days. I believe I caught something while I was at MegaCon, so if you guys want to know what happened at MegaCon, very soon I will be releasing a vlog specifically showing what happened at MegaCon, the experience that I had, and all the cool people that I met on my vlogging channel. So if you guys want to go check that out, you guys can go there and see it. But as for how my voice is, that is why my voice is like this, because I believe I caught something at MegaCon. But now that we got that out of the way, let's go back to the topic at hand. So starting off this list is The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, which to me is kind of a surprise, because ultimately when we watch, these Hunger Games movies, we start to think about, okay, wait a second, so when was the last time we had a Hunger Games movie? Well, luckily now in 2023, we actually got a Hunger Games movie. So essentially 9 years after Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1, we get a new Hunger Games movie, which is absolutely insane. So next on the list is Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which is regarded by many as one of Marvel's best movies. And if we stop to think about it, it's also one of the more consequential ones too. It introduces us to Bucky Barnes, which is a very integral character to Steve Rogers. We get a lot of espionage, we get a lot of, spy thriller vibes from this movie. And I think they nail pretty much everything that there is to be even spoken of when it comes to this movie in particular. And what I can't forget about this movie is probably one of the most interesting lines that we get from Falcon right before we even meet, see Steve Rogers. We see Steve Rogers and we see, Falcon kind of working out. We get the "on your left" catchphrase, which is hilarious, because if you're a fast walker and you pass somebody, there's nothing funnier than just letting out like, on your left. It's really funny, and I think it's a great movie. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. Probably one of Marvel's best movies. Next up, Expendables 3, which kind of surprised me, because now in 2023, we got an Expendables movie, which was Expendables 4, but, Expendables 3 was already not great, so then you get another Expendables movie, which I haven't watched yet, so I can't really speak to it, but all the reviews say it's not that great. So, I may watch Expendables 4, but to me personally, I think after you do one movie with a great ensemble cast, don't stretch it. I mean, don't stretch your luck, at least. That's what I would prefer. As long as people like it, that's a good thing, but once people start crapping on your thing, you're just kind of like throwing money to the pigeons, and yeah, that wouldn't be great. But then again, Expendables 3 is a 10-year-old movie now, which is insane. Next on the list is none other than Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is part of probably one of the best trilogy series pertaining to a specific franchise that I've seen in a really long time. And Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is just one of the three, which the other ones were Rise of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes, which are incredible movies. I mean, if you haven't had a chance to go see these movies, go see these movies. But it's really fun to talk about this because we're gonna get a new Planet of the Apes movie this year, which is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which picks up kind of several years after Caesar's death. So we're gonna see a whole entire new world. We're being introduced to new characters. So this is gonna be a very exciting thing to see this year. But yeah, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, 10 years old. Next up, Edge of Tomorrow, which kind of surprised me because I never expected this movie to be 10 years old this year, and I really like this movie. I think Edge of Tomorrow is a fun movie to watch. I may be a little bit biased because I love time loop movies, and Edge of Tomorrow is one of those time loop movies that we get, which is awesome. And I really do hope that they release another Edge of Tomorrow, because I know that they're probably working on a sequel to Edge of Tomorrow. It just hasn't been announced yet in its entirety. But if they do, it's going to be really, really fun, and I can't wait to see this happen and really come to fruition. Another movie turning 10 this year is Non-Stop, which is probably one of those typical Liam Neeson movies. Liam Neeson does a fantastic job in this movie, and I think it's a great, airplane thriller. We've seen airplane thrillers before. There's countless other ones, but this one is very interesting, specifically because it keeps you guessing. It keeps you, on alert as to who could this person be? Who could the hacker be? Who could be the person trying to sabotage this flight? And it's so interesting to watch this movie and think, holy cow, this movie is now 10 years old, which is mind-boggling to me. Now, if you're a lover of Denzel Washington like I am, then you're gonna like to hear that 10 years has passed since The Equalizer. The Equalizer, yeah, like the series that now is a trilogy, considering that last year we got an Equalizer 3, and now we have this trilogy of movies for The Equalizer. A lot of people like that one, but everybody says that the first one pretty much is unbeatable. And I do have to agree, because he is so badass in that movie that I don't know if he could possibly top himself. Another surprising addition to the 10-year-old movies is Ex Machina, which the other day, I realized that this was a movie by A24, and A24 has literally been on a roll for a while now. I mean, from Everything Everywhere All at Once, and then they released, recently now they have a movie coming out with Kristen Stewart, which she's kind of like in love with this wrestler. They have countless other movies, and they produced probably one of the best series on Netflix in Beef, which is a great thing. But nonetheless, Ex Machina is 10 years old, and the fact that we get to, think that this movie is now 10 years old, the visual effects are amazing, the acting is amazing, the people who they chose to be in this movie, Alicia Vikander, Oscar Isaac, Domhnall Gleeson. I mean, holy cow, you have this incredible, cast list, even though it's a small cast list. It's a great cast for this type of movie, and it kind of keeps you guessing as to where AI is going to go and gets your mind rolling in regards to artificial intelligence and how we're going to deal with that in the future. Another movie turning 10 this year is Gone Girl. Yeah, the movie with Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike, which was regarded as a fantastic movie when it came out, and it's still till this day, referenced in a lot of pop culture. It became a pop cult hit, I definitely need to go back and rewatch it because I forgot some details of the movie itself, but I have to go back and rewatch it because it's such an interesting movie in terms of, how they position characters, how certain characters are portrayed in this movie, so much so that certain characters you may think are innocent aren't actually innocent, those little aspects are just so fascinating to see, and I can't wait to go back and rewatch this movie that now is officially 10 years old. So for the next movie turning 10, I'd prefer to not even say what it is, but in fact, show you something that I have of it. Yes. I think you guys get the idea here, right? I think you guys can figure out what movie I am talking about that has officially turned 10. Let's see. Yes, I'm talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. It's hard to believe that a movie that came out 10 years ago now is so influential and has literally spun into theme park rides. I mean, heck, out on the West Coast, there's Mission Breakout, and then we have here in Florida, we have Cosmic Rewind, which is easily one of my favorite roller coasters of all time. I mean, you could strip that roller coaster of the fact that it's, Guardians related. I'd still love that coaster. But the fact that it's Guardians related and it, has music and it's absolutely amazing and it connects to the overall feel of who the Guardians of the Galaxy are is amazing. And to think that this movie is now 10 years old and has spun into these incredible, things, specifically Avengers and all these other, little properties that they have shown up in is amazing. And the fact that, heck, again, 10 years old is pretty shocking. Now, when it comes to remakes, sometimes it's good to also think about the remakes that came out, even 10 years ago now, and that is the RoboCop remake. Yes, that movie that was remade for the more modern audience that came out. The movie, say what you want, may have its own structural issues, but I think it sticks the landing in certain areas, specifically sort of like the storyline that is very well connected and similar to the original, which is really cool to think that this is a movie that originally came out, I believe in the 80s, correct me if I'm wrong, but, RoboCop was a very influential movie that they decided to remake, and to think that this is now 10 years old, I think it's time that we get another remake of RoboCop, and this time make it more, personal, something way more personal than the original one, and make us feel even more connected to the main character, which are certain things that we don't feel specifically for this movie, but ultimately I would love to see in a new version of RoboCop. All right, next up, X-Men Days of Future Past, which some say is one of the more, perfect X-Men movies. A lot of people love this movie because it bridges together two eras of X-Men. You have an era of X-Men that most people in the early 2000s grew up with, and then seeing those characters in a new time period is very interesting because you start to see a younger version of these characters. And, the fact that they brought back, Wolverine, himself, Hugh Jackman, is in this movie is awesome. Those little details that they bring back for this kind of movie is incredible. And to think that we're about to get Deadpool 3 and Hugh Jackman is still playing this role as Wolverine, and to think that he won a Guinness Book of World Records for playing a character for that long And now he's gonna have to get a new one, because now he's been playing this character even longer than when he received the Guinness World Record. So hats off to Hugh Jackman for being the Wolverine. So 2014 isn't without its cult classics, and one of those cult classics is Lucy. Now, this is another one of those movies that I have to go back and rewatch again, because it really does impress you with the level of detailing that it gives you in terms of percentage-wise. Like when you see, Scarlett Johansson, progressing her mind, you see like 10%, 20%, 30%. Those moments are when you start to see, how somebody could, expand their mind. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that, what this movie portrays, which is way more supernatural-esque of what someone can do with 100% of their mindset. But it does kind of interest you into thinking like, you could probably push boundaries with utilizing more of your brain, which is a concept that we've seen in Limitless, although in Limitless, it feels a little bit more, real in a way. Now, this one I remember seeing in theaters, and it's pretty shocking to me that now it's 10 years old. Yeah, it's Transformers: Age of Extinction, which, to be very honest with you, I kind of like this movie. Now, a lot of people gave it crap for it not having the original cast in it, not having Shia LaBeouf, having to change everybody around, but I think it was a good fresh air, like, a new birth for the Transformers franchise in a way. Sort of like what we got with Rise of the Beasts, although I do have to be honest, Transformers The Last Night, which came after this one, not my favorite Transformers movie. It just didn't resonate with me as much, but Age of Extinction, really good. And I really like Mark Wahlberg in this movie, to be honest with you. He plays a really great role in this movie. I still think this is the type of role made for him. As long as it doesn't come near Uncharted, which is good, He's good in anything. Just do not put him in another Uncharted movie, because honestly, it kind of hurts me to even talk about that, because I really like Mark Wahlberg, but anyway, Age of Extinction is now 10 years old. 2014 also bought us some really cool indie classics as well. I mean, Earth to Echo is a really interesting choice because, it does follow the E.T. trope. Little alien comes from outer space and kids have to help it in some way. It follows the E.T. storyline. That's fine. But it gives it a more modern take. And I think it's a really interesting little movie that if you haven't watched, go watch Earth to Echo. Now, if I were to put this next one on a list of favorite movies of all time, this one would probably be within either my top 5 or top 10 favorite movies of all time. And that is Whiplash. Whiplash is a fantastic movie. It breaks boundaries. It gives its, respect to, jazz. It talks about the pressures of being a jazz musician. It talks about, creating this environment that, although it is toxic, we do see a certain level of kinship, in musicians, and, later having, seeing interviews of, either J.K. Simmons or Miles Teller talking about their experience with Whiplash, saying that they were kind of built for this role. A lot of these people kind of fit really well with these, characters in real life. I saw J.K. Simmons talking about how technically they wrote this character in a way that talks about, him being a musician and being like a teacher and trying to kind of conjure up, the courage to bring what he couldn't in his life to these other people. But although we see a toxic relationship, we do understand that ultimately he's pushing him to be a much better musician in the end. But this movie is absolutely amazing, and if you've never watched Whiplash, go watch Whiplash, because you will not be disappointed in the level of care and precision in cinematography that this movie has, because it's absolutely amazing. Disney also gifted us a great movie in 2014, and that is Big Hero 6, which I was surprised to find out later that this is actually a Marvel property that Disney took on and made a movie out of. And it's crazy because I don't remember the Marvel logo appearing at any point in this movie, but there is one thing I do remember that does show up in this movie, and that is Stan Lee. Stan Lee makes a cameo in an animated movie that technically doesn't even have the Marvel name connected to it, but we know for a fact that it became a success due to that fact, and the fact being that it's a Marvel movie that Disney was producing. So there you go. Controversy is also another thing that 2014 became very famous for, so much so that there was the release of a specific little movie with Seth Rogen and James Franco called The Interview, which, whenever we talk about The Interview, we cannot forget to mention that Sony was hacked by, I think, North Korea or something. Like, there was a hacker, okay, in 2014 that leaked a lot of movies out onto the internet, and one of the movies that leaked onto the internet was The Interview. And I remember that this movie kind of bombed at the box office due to the fact that this movie was literally out on the internet and people could just go and watch it. Is kind of insane. And to think that this movie is now 10 years old, and frankly a cult movie now, has a bit of a cult following. A lot of people try to reference it in certain ways, but it's really funny that this movie is now 10 years old. It's kind of wild. Another awesome little movie that released in 2014 that I remember very fondly going to the theater and watching with my friends was Taken 3. I remember very clearly us, like, you know, the squad, all of us just heading to the theater. I remember it was like probably a Friday or something like this, and it was like right after school, and everybody, you know, we all met up at the theater, and we were sitting in the theater watching with a bunch of people on, like, at night, which was really cool because we saw a bunch of other people from our school there. Unfortunately, that movie theater closed during the pandemic and never reopened, and then now they essentially sold, you know, the building was sold off, so we don't have that theater anymore. But I do remember fondly going to that theater and seeing friends and just having a ball with this movie. And it's a Taken movie with Liam Neeson, you know, which is awesome, and the fact that it's a trilogy is pretty freaking wild. A surprising one to add to this list is the Ninja Turtles movie that we got from Michael Bay, which is kind of crazy to think that Michael Bay directed a Ninja Turtles movie. But then again, he already has a really good partnership with Hasbro due to Transformers, so it kind of was already a natural fit. Now, it's a funny movie. It's a really fun movie to just sit back and watch. Some people didn't love the CG due to the fact that it looked very realistic, and sometimes people didn't like it because it was a bit uncanny. But man, it was a fun movie. You know, it was a bit grungy as well, which is crazy. The fact that they got Megan Fox to show up in this one as well. And this movie ended up having a sequel, which is also mind-blowing because some people didn't like this movie and it ended up getting a sequel otherwise. So yeah, Ninja Turtles, 10 years old. And to round out this list, at the very end, we're talking about one of those superheroes that I absolutely love, and that is Spider-Man. And in specific, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 with Andrew Garfield. This movie, at first, I didn't like, but as time went on, I have officially started to like this movie more and more. So much so that, seeing Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire in No Way Home was such an emotional thing for me, because seeing how the stories of both this Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man kind of continued on, and we get a direct correlation to the events of these movies in No Way Home is pretty awesome. And just the casting in its entirety of this movie. Andrew Garfield does a great Spider-Man. Emma Stone, great as Gwen Stacy. We have Electro in Jamie Foxx. This is the type of really great casting that few people ever go back and think of, like, holy cow, they really cast these people in these great roles. And we can't forget Paul Giamatti as Rhino, which, although short-lived, was pretty freaking awesome, if you ask me. But yeah, dude, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is now 10 years old. Yeah, feel old yet? So that is the list of 10-year-old movies now. I know, it's kind of crazy to think that these movies are now 10 years old, and to think that going back and rewatching these movies and thinking, holy cow, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was still in high school, which is kind of crazy to think about. I was in my junior year of high school. It's pretty wild to think how time flies and all these incredible movies are released, and then we go back and think about those moments in time where we were like with people, or the moments that we remember from watching these movies, or kind of the magical effect that these movies had affected us. And I'm pretty sure that I only scratched the surface of the incredible movies that we got in 2014. But if you remember any other movie, please let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about our movies from like 10 years ago that we watched and we enjoyed, and let's have that discussion down in the comments below. I love having discussions with you guys in the comments about your favorite movies, specifically the ones that came out 10 years ago that now you're going back and rewatching. Let me know what movies you're watching. If it's any of the ones that I mentioned, or any specific one that you can remember that I didn't remember, leave that down in the comments below and let's talk, because I love those talks. And if you're already down there, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified when new videos go live on this channel. And thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.